What turns in the heavens to make an infant breathe, a monarch doubt, a comet bend its tail? My grandmother whispered that question into my ear the night she died, leaving the warm citrus scent of her cough drops on my collar and the chill of a mystery in my chest. She spent her life cataloguing half-forgotten sky lore in the archives of Ceres City, tracing improbable links between eclipses, royal marriages, and sudden migrations of butterflies. Her answer, scribbled in the margins of her final notebook, was always the same sketch: a Ferris wheel whose spokes were not cars but planets, and whose axle sat somewhere beyond the old constellation of the Lyre. I grew up calling it the celestial Ferris wheel, equation, and bedtime terror. Yet the official texts of the Astronomers Guild reduced it to a folk superstition, an impossible contraption, 8 light-years high, rotating worlds instead of cabins, realigning destinies with every stately revolution. Serious scholars had little patience for so grand a metaphor. Little patience, that is. Until the night the fixed stars twitched like a sleeping animal, and our entire solar system lurched 5 degrees west in the sky. Instruments screamed, temples rang bells, satellites lost orientation and then rediscovered it, as if some cosmic hand had reached down, given the playground carousel one playful shove, and vanished. Almost overnight, governments funded new observatories and the Guild turned to people like me, archivists, who could interpret grandmotherly sketches as well as pass gravimetric data. I was 32, still young enough to be romantic, and vain enough to think I could finish the riddle she'd left unfinished. The Guild posted me to the frontier station of Periloon, a glassy outpost that hung over the chilled ocean of Olgarth 4 like a tear about to fall. From there, with telescopes drunk on starlight and computers humming lullabies, we watched for signs of the wheel. 3 months passed, with nothing but drift noise. Then, during the silent hour before dawn, the station's shadow sensors recorded a silhouette. 12 evenly spaced nodes connected by an outer rim, gliding behind the Lesser Magellanic Cloud. It was not a natural constellation. It rotated, slow as forgiveness. And every time it completed a single turn confirmed by our parallax models, some measurable improbability flared in our corner of the cosmos. Binary stars that should never have met became partners, twin brothers on Ceres Prime, parted at birth, reunited on successive heartbeats. A cancelled coup rekindled. The pattern was grotesque in its precision. I heard my grandmother laughing in the ventilators. We named the structure the Wheel of Idra for bureaucratic brevity, but in my notes I kept her phrase, turns worlds, not cabins. I also began a log of private anomalies because around the time we first sighted it, my own life tilted. On day 9, after first contact, I met Amira's Rowe, the station's propulsion engineer. She had salt-silver hair and the self-assurance of a pilot who's learned the universe is secretly running on her schedule. The night shift caught us sharing coffee on the dorsal ring, a vantage normally forbidden due to micrometeorites. We talked about rust, orchids, and improbable coincidences until shift alarms separated us. Within a week, we were finishing each other's number sequences. Within a month, she was wearing my grandmother's skyglass pendant, something I'd never removed for anyone. We decided recklessly that we would reach the wheel, not through telescopes, not by remote probe, but in person. Official doctrine called it observational only, fearing gravitational undertow or existential contagion. But doctrine has always been a paper wall when love wants a door. Amires designed a lean vessel named the Coincider, whose core engine borrowed math from her hobby in topological origami. I provided star charts older than Empire. We forged launch approvals, trusting that by the time anyone in authority noticed, the wheel's own meddling would protect us. The universe conspired to agree. Weather over the ocean calmed for the first time in 94 days. The cargo elevator that should have jammed under icy spray slid open like a bowing usher. Even the station's paranoid AI cleared our escape vector, citing a non-existent Director 47 that later vanished from its memory logs. Thus, propelled by holes in reality, we slipped past the barrier patrols and engaged the drive. The journey should have lasted 9 standard months. We crossed the distance in 13 hours. Outside the portholes, starlight elongated into cerulean ribbons, then snapped back into discrete jewels, arrayed around an unthinkably huge geometry. Imagine a carnival ride built for titans, its rim traced by incandescent continents, its spokes broad enough to host seas, its hub glowing like a younger, more impotent sun. Moons orbited the spokes, clouds crowned the apex. Entire civilizations must have been living on what appeared, at our scale, to be decorative rivets. We approached the gap between 2 orbital worlds, their gravitational fields braiding into a causeway wide enough to slip through. The ship trembled as if tickled. The navigation screens glitched with improbable variables: love, regret, serendipity, where coordinates ought to be. And then, impossible to grasp even now, our chronometers reset. The wheel did not mark time, it reissued it. Past and future were simply frames along its rim. When one rotated under our hull, we glimpsed a prehistoric ocean we'd never visited, yet still recognized. When another aligned, I saw myself as a child chasing a comet I'd only dreamt about. The dizzying montage forced us to rely on heartbeats rather than clocks. We set the coincider into parking orbit near the 3rd spoke world, because its spectral signature matched human breathable air. We named it Vesper. Descending through lavender skies, we found grand plazas paved with interlocking letters, each tile a symbol from a language none of our translation algorithms could unify. Yet, the phrases felt familiar. At the center of the plaza rose a truncated tower humming in iambic pentameter. From its sides unfurled banners embroidered with silhouettes of Ferris wheels nested infinitely inward, like mirrors in a funhouse corridor. No inhabitants greeted us. But we were not alone. The planet itself, wind, water, resonant stone, seemed to lean closer, listening. I felt words bubble up in my skull, unbidden. Welcome, Adjusted. Mister. Amira squeezed my hand, nodding. She'd heard the same greeting. The wheel was not merely the arranger of destinies. It required maintenance, caretakers capable of tiny calibrations. Evidently, it had chosen us. We followed a spiraling ramp into the tower's heart. A chamber awaited, domed and translucent. At its center floated a mechanical sphere no larger than my fist, covered in rotating rings. The rings displayed miniature worlds arrayed exactly like those on the wheel. One by one they clicked, aligning, then misaligning, like gears seeking equilibrium. Each misalignment produced a glint of light, a new coincidence rippling outward into the cosmos. On a pedestal below the sphere rested a stylus. Take it, Adjuster. I hesitated. To write a new angle, a new fate, on that device felt sacrilegious, yet to refuse felt cowardly. Amira's, fearless, lifted the stylus. The sphere paused, expectant. She glanced at me. Which world needs nudging? My grandmother taught me never to meddle with what we don't understand, I whispered. Your grandmother also spent her life trying to understand, she countered. Then, softer, maybe this is understanding. She coaxed my fingers onto the stylus. Together, we traced a minuscule adjustment to the orbit of a blue dot labeled only with vibrations. The rings clicked. Somewhere far away, perhaps a civil war averted, or 2 strangers met on a train, or a scientist rediscovered laughter. We would never know. The sphere resumed its dance, almost relieved. We spent unmeasured time on Vesper days. Weeks? The wheel's chronology pooled around us like mercury, refusing linear compliance. We learned the alphabet of the plaza tiles by tasting them. Each glyph dissolved into a flavor: rosemary, burnt sugar, rain on asphalt. And the flavors strung into syntax our minds interpreted more quickly than sight. The tiles told of the wheel's origin. not engineered by gods, but grown from the moment the universe first recognized its own loneliness. It needed company, so it built a device capable of folding improbable distances and improbable hearts into each other's reach. The wheel had no operator. Its revolutions were its language, its love letters flung across space-time. Sooner or later it produced creatures like us who craved narrative threads, and so it invested us with styluses, i.e. with permission. We wandered other spoke worlds. On Aurelion, days lasted 15 minutes, but sunsets took hours as triple suns pinwheeled across the horizon. The population of winged scholars debated whether gratitude or curiosity was the primal emotion. On Zephyra, the air so thin you could see music, we watched nomads paint their life stories onto kites and release them into the jet stream. Everywhere, the same subtle message awaited. You may adjust, but adjust gently. Yet influence breeds hubris. One evening, back on Vespa, Amyras proposed a bolder calibration. Align our home system into synchronous harmony, eliminating its destructive seasons, hurricanes, droughts, pollen waves that killed children. A small tilt, she argued, less than we've already done elsewhere. I fought, terrified, awestruck, feeling my grandmother's caution as a ghostly hand on my shoulder. But Amira's conviction glowed like a lighthouse. She loved me. She loved life. She wanted to alleviate unnecessary pain. The wheel, she insisted, had chosen us precisely because we could dream at that scale. Our debate lasted hours. Finally, we reached a compromise. Before any grand gesture, we would consult the wheel directly. Its hub, a place we had not yet dared to enter. The hub floated miles above Vespa's surface, a gravitoless cathedral of spinning light. We ascended in a shuttle woven from magnetized sand, the only material Vespa yielded willingly for the purpose. Approaching, I felt a harmonic resonance in my teeth, identical to the note my grandmother hummed when sorting constellations. We stepped onto a platform made of crystallized probability. There, coiled like a serpent of mirrors, lay the wheel's prime equation, shifting shape faster than perception. When I stared too long, I saw my childhood kite torn by sudden wind. I saw Amira's tasting her first mango. I saw tragedies we hadn't lived and miracles we'd forgotten. The equation was everything and nothing. Waiting, a panel of lights ignited, forming a question in a language beyond language. What do you seek to align? Amira spoke aloud. Whether words or intent, I can't tell. She pictured our homeworld's axis straightening, storms quelled, harvests abundant. I watched the wheel test that future like a dress rehearsal. Cities flourished, yes, but creativity waned. Complacency spread. Great symphonies never written. Children who would have bonded over shared catastrophes never met. A poet with wildfire in her gaze turned banker and never learned to sing. Paradise, it seemed, had the taste of chalk. The equation refracted again, showing a second rehearsal. We changed nothing. Storms raged, tragedies amassed. But in their wake came courage, invention, empathy sharpened like blades on stone. The panel's query returned. Alignment or drift? Amira's trembled. Tears or maybe compressed rainbows slipped down her cheeks. She turned to me, and I feared fracture. But she managed a bittersweet smile. It's asking whether we can stomach cost, she whispered. I reached for her hand. Perfection dulls the wheel, I said, quoting a half-remembered line from my grandmother's notebook. Together we answered, drift. A hush, like the moment after a bell stops ringing, spread through the hub. The panel dissolved. The prime equation folded into a lotus of darkness and then into nothing at all. Somewhere else, I sensed, hurricanes kept forming, but also lullabies and courage and painting smudged with tears. The wheel accepted our hesitation as calibration enough. We had, by choosing not to choose, aligned something deeper, the boundary between mercy and meddling. We returned to Vespa carrying relief, but also sorrow. for we understood our tenure as adjusters was ending. The stylus awaited new hands, the wheel required fresh doubts. On the plaza, the tiles we once read now tasted of closure. Cedar, dusk, first frost. We left the stylus on its pedestal, kissed beneath banners unravelling into stardust, and climbed aboard the coincider for the journey home. The trip back stretched, mercifully, to its proper 9 months. We charted phenomena we'd never have noticed before. The way twin quasars pulsed in trochaic meter, how rogue planets carried the scent of burnt cinnamon, how silence sometimes folded into origami swans. We talked about staying together planet-side, maybe adopting a patch of desert and teaching it to blossom. But we also allowed for the possibility that the wheel might separate us. Not by malice, but by narrative necessity. Love, we'd learned, is less a possession than a persistent intention whispered through space. We arrived to find the galaxy mostly unchanged, yet subtly brighter. A lost research probe resurfaced after 2 decades, broadcasting a sonnet. The Guild archives accepted my grandmother's notebooks as essential doctrine. Peraloon Station had built an orchid conservatory bearing Amira's name, though she'd never told them of her hobby. Coincidence? Alignment? Each revolution of the wheel had blurred those categories. The Guild interrogated us, of course. We told only fragments of the truth. They saw the wonder in our eyes and chose not to press. There are secrets that function best as rumours. A confirmed miracle, after all, becomes just another law of physics. Years passed. Amiris and I did settle in the desert, coaxing flowers from sand. During monsoon season, we'd sit on the porch, listening to the mild chaos of wind. Sometimes lightning spelled curlicues across the sky that reminded me of plaza tiles. I'd trace them on her palm. Rosemary, burnt sugar, rain on asphalt. We never again tried to rewrite destinies, but we remained alert to the subtle shiver of the cosmic ride. On the last night of her life, peaceful, inevitable, no tropical storms defeated or summoned. Amiris asked me what I thought the wheel would do after every story was told. I said perhaps it would fold in on itself like a satisfied seashell and dream of simpler shapes, or perhaps it would become a child's toy in a grander cosmos, spinning galaxies the way our fairground wheels once spun paper tickets. She smiled, too tired to speak, but her eyes replied, or perhaps it will keep turning forever, because forever is only its way of keeping time. Now I, the keeper of our intertwined memories, write this testament for the Guild, for the unborn, for that lonely device at the cosmos's heart. Let it be known, the wheel is not a judge but a gardener. It prunes, it grafts, it occasionally steps back to admire or abhor its own handiwork. It invites caretakers, but the finest service we can render is sometimes restraint. To stand before infinite levers and pull none is a revolution in its own right. Tonight, I climb a dune behind our home and gaze at the familiar night canopy. I cannot see the wheel with naked eyes, but I feel the subtle tug when it crests another epoch. The stars seem to wink, as if Cathans were passing on a ride too vast for carnival grounds. Somewhere planets shuffle like cards, lovers meet, kingdoms fall, butterflies change migration. I place my hand on my grandmother's skyglass pendant, worn thin as eyelids, and I whisper her question into the dark. What turns in the heavens to make an infant breathe? A monarch doubt, a comet bend its tail. The sky answers with silence and the faintest sensation of motion, as if the entire cosmos has just clicked into its next alignment. And I, content to be both passenger and witness, let the wheel carry me onward. Egg.